This is lesson 1.3 on tissues. This lesson coincides with the lesson 1.3 in BUZZ. Just want to highlight a few things that are mentioned in BUZZ regarding tissues. I want to start out by going over the levels of organization. This is really important to understand how tissues are developed, how they're built, and what they build into. We mentioned in biology the levels of organization, so this may look familiar to you. But the levels of organization here is showing you starting at the molecular level, the chemical level, with atoms to a molecule, and then to the cellular level. But I want you to remember that the smallest unit of life starts at the cellular level. This is where living things begin. So atoms and molecules, not really considered living things. It's not until the cellular level that we actually call the organism or specimen as living. All right, so from the cellular level, just one single cell. They're showing you a smooth muscle cell here as an example, but it could be a nerve cell, a brain cell, cardiac cell. Just for this example, they're showing you a smooth muscle cell. So smooth muscle cells will layer themselves, and multiple muscle cells forms a tissue. In this case, it's a muscle tissue, specifically smooth muscle tissue. Smooth muscle tissue, if I could speak right today, is found on the outer side of the stomach. So tissues will build some type of organ, or it could be a blood vessel too. After the organ level, multiple organs build up an entire system. So they're showing you part of the digestive system here, the esophagus, stomach, gallbladder, and the intestines, the small and large intestines. And all of your body systems make up you. So one whole organism, one human being. They refer to this as the organismal level. So to take away from this, the smallest unit of life is the cell at the cellular level. Multiple cells build tissues, tissues build organs, multiple organs form a system, and all of your body systems make up you as the human being, one organism. So we're going to focus on the tissue level in this presentation. There's four main types of tissues that you need to understand. You need to know what they do, where they're found, some special characteristics, and examples in the body of where to find these tissues. The four main types of tissues that are found in the human body are epithelial tissue, muscle tissue, connective tissue, and nervous tissue. The picture here on the right shows an example of connective tissue, epithelial tissue, muscle tissue, and nervous tissue. And with the exception of nervous tissue, muscle, connective, and epithelial tissues can all look pretty different just depending on the type with the subtype within each of these tissue types. So there's many different types of connective tissues, many types of, or I should say many shapes of epithelial tissue, and 3 different types of muscle tissue. So depending on what type of muscle, connective, or epithelial tissue we're looking at, it may look very different. And we'll see some examples of that later in the presentation. Alright, the first one we're going to talk about is epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissue covers, so it's covering something. That's a good way to remember epithelial tissue. The main functions: protection, secretion, absorption, and excretion. Epithelial tissue covers the body's surfaces. So your skin that you feel on the outside of your body is actually epithelial tissue. Covering and lining of internal organs and glands as well. There's all kinds of epithelial tissue within your body. Some characteristics of epithelial tissue: it lacks blood vessels, tightly packed cells, and they rapidly divide. And one thing to think about is why does epithelial tissue rapidly divide? What's happening to it? Where is it located? What's its function? Why might epithelial tissue need to rapidly divide? Some examples of epithelial tissue on the skin, walls of organs, lining the stomach. Epithelial tissue lines the inside of the stomach, lines the esophagus, lines air sacs in the lungs. These are just a few examples of where epithelial tissue is found. Okay. Think about what happens. We talked about this in biology class. I know that's been a while, but what happens on the membranes of air sacs in the lungs? All right, epithelial tissue, again, all kinds of different shapes of epithelial tissue. You don't need to memorize all of these for this class, but if you were to take this class in college, you would need to be able to remember these and identify these. So lucky you, you don't need to do that for this class, but I just wanted to show you in case you ever see slides of epithelial tissue and you say, wow, they really do look different. That's because depending on where the epithelial tissue is found in the body, it's going to be shaped differently because it's related to its function. So remember, form and function are related. How something is designed is usually really related to how it works, what it's doing. All right, here's some real slides of epithelial tissue. This here is showing you the epithelium here. This could be lining the inside of the stomach, possibly. This is a type of muscle here. This looks like smooth muscle to me, so that's my guess that it might be the stomach. This would be the inside of your stomach, all your food and your guts and all the good stuff you had for lunch or breakfast. Epithelial tissue is going to be lining the inside of your stomach. This here is showing you a real up-close view of epithelial tissue. And this here is showing you all the different shapes and types of epithelial tissue. These are actual slides that you could look under a compound light microscope. Again, you don't need to remember all of these, just showing you the differences and what they look like. All right, moving on to muscle tissue. This one, you probably guessed, muscle tissue is important for movement. All of your muscles help you move your body. They're attached to the bone and the walls of hollow organs, your heart. Okay, so like your stomach on the last picture we saw, I was pointing out some muscle. And it looked like this. So it could have been the stomach. Maybe it was the intestines. Okay. So characteristics, muscle tissue contracts in response to some stimulus. So nerve endings are actually going to be attached to your muscle tissues, and when we get to the muscular system, we will learn more about exactly how muscle tissue contracts. There's 3 types of muscular tissue. Maybe this is familiar to you. We covered this in biology class. Cardiac tissue, cardiac muscular tissue, skeletal muscular tissue, and smooth muscle tissue. This here would be an example. This is just a cartoon drawn diagram. It's not actually smooth muscle tissue, but this would be smooth muscle tissue. Skeletal tissue, skeletal muscle tissue, and cardiac muscle tissue. Alright, so here's the real thing. Oops. Here's the real thing, muscle tissue. This is what smooth muscle tissue looks like in your body. Smooth muscle tissue is going to work to move things through your body, helps move food, urine, organs, the walls of organs that have to pump, do some kind of pumping action, with the exception of the heart. The heart has its own special muscle. But like the stomach would have smooth muscle tissue, your intestines would have smooth muscle tissue as well. I also want to point out the nucleus. These little dark spots on the muscle tissue here are the nucleus. It's really packed in there, all the cells, all these muscle cells are really packed in there, tightly packed. Cardiac muscle tissue. You don't see as many nuclei as you do with smooth muscle. That's what these little spots would be. These would be nuclei. These marks here, kind of hard to see on here. It looks like there's some striations. Cardiac muscle. And this would be an intercalated disc. It's really the only one I see. Right over here they are. That one's kind of faint. These intercalated discs are very faint. On the diagram you can see it better. Over on this diagram you can see them. This is a good example of cardiac, actual cardiac muscle tissue. You can see the intercalated discs and the nucleus in cardiac tissue. Striations. It's also a similarity that we see between cardiac and skeletal muscle tissue. But cardiac tissue is kind of special. It has intercalated discs within its tissue. And then finally, skeletal tissue. It looks similar to cardiac tissue, but it's a little bit different. It also has striations. The nuclei are not as easy to identify. Oops. Within skeletal tissue, muscle tissue. The striations, though, I think are a little bit more easy to see on skeletal tissue, skeletal muscle tissue. Okay. And then third one is connective tissue. Connective tissue connects. It binds, supports, protects, fills in spaces, stores fat, it produces blood cells. So as you can imagine, connective tissue is found again all throughout your body in various parts and has various functions just depending on the type of connective tissue. But here you just need to know generalizations, the general functions of connective tissue as just one type of tissue. It can be vascular, avascular. So it can have blood cells or not have blood vessels or not have blood vessels. Examples of connective tissue is your blood, bone, cartilage. Helps connect muscles to bones and makes up the framework of many of your organs. So let's take a look at your connective tissue. Okay, here's 6 different types of connective tissue. You have your areolar connective tissue, adipose tissue, which, does anyone know what adipose tissue is? Think about it. I may ask you in class. Fibrous connective tissue, your blood cells, are actually, your blood cells are actually connective tissue. Osseous tissue, your bones are made up of osseous tissue. And hyaline cartilage. Hyaline cartilage is actually in your ears. And nervous tissue, this is our last one we're going to talk about, conducts impulses for coordination, regulation, integration, and sensory reception. So nervous tissue, your nervous system, surprise, surprise, this is your brain, your spinal cord, and your nerves. So your cells are going to be communicating with each other and other body parts. So I think nervous tissue is really cool. Cells communicate with each other and with other body parts. Oops, and I see that I copied that. That's wrong. Examples would be in your brain, of course, spinal cord, your nerves. I know that's location, but it's really also examples. Nervous tissue, though, is also going to be connected to your muscles, telling them what to do, telling your organs what to do. Alright, so nervous tissue, this is what it looks like. I think it looks kind of crazy in comparison to the other types of tissue. It's very uniquely designed. Designed for what it's due. Form follows function. Maybe function follows form. You decide. Dendrites, axon, cell body, purplish region. The nucleus is the darker purple region here. You don't need to know all of these parts yet, but when we get to the nervous system, you will. Neuron. This is one this is one nervous cell. One nerve cell, it's called a neuron. Multiple neurons make up nervous tissue. Okay. So the 4 main tissues that you need to focus on are nervous tissue, connective tissue, muscle tissue, and epithelial tissue. I like to remember epithelial covers things, covers body parts, forms the linings of some of your organs. Muscle tissue, we have 3 types of muscle tissue: skeletal, cardiac, and smooth muscle. Connective tissue connects. So depending on what type of connective tissue is going to determine where it's actually found in the body and what it's actually doing specifically. And then your nervous tissue, of course, is going to be found for your nervous system. So your brain, your spinal cord, and your nerves. Alright? So that easily wraps up lesson 1.3 tissues. We're going to be going over some of this in class. So if you have questions, please ask them. Thanks. Bye.